So today I want to talk about what I like to think of as the booster rocket analogy. The analogy is quite useful in business. What it is if you look at SpaceX and the Starship, for example, right? This is the rocket ship that's supposed to take people to Mars one day. It's made up of the Starship rocket and the booster, right? And the booster is about 2/3 of the entire thing. So it's massive, right? And the entire goal of the booster rocket is to get Starship into orbit and then obviously to proceed further to Mars and so on and so forth. But once it's in orbit, the job of the booster rocket is done. It literally comes back to Earth to be reused to help launch another Starship, right? But if you think about it, if Elon could just choose how to do things and he didn't have to worry about things like the laws of physics, then the core thing that he really wants and needs is the Starship rocket, not the booster, right? He has to build a booster because of gravity, right? He has to get all this extra power to get into orbit because the Starship rocket on its own is unable to do that. It doesn't have enough power or propulsion, right? So what I find incredibly interesting is that in my experience, the same analogy applies very much in, something like a crypto project or any type of business, in that there's usually some sort of core thing that people want to offer or sell, right? However, in order to get into orbit, in order to build enough momentum for people to find out about you, that thing, the core thing, is rarely enough to get there on its own, which means that you have to build a booster rocket whose entire purpose is to get you momentum, is to get you into orbit. So an example, I can give you two examples at the top of my head. One is the UFC, right? So the UFC, it turned out in the early days that just putting on great fights, weirdly, was not enough to get the UFC off the ground. They were doing incredibly bad. They were basically on the brink of bankruptcy. And Dana White tells this story of the creation of the Ultimate Fighter reality show, which is where they have two teams. These two teams kind of like live together, and they have, these two teams are fighting each other. And I believe the winner of the entire show gets a UFC contract, right? But as you can imagine, there's sort of like character development and storytelling that's embedded into that. And so it kind of beautifully builds up, draws in eyeballs and lets people come along for the ride. And that all that attention and interest can then be funneled into the pay-per-view on that Saturday night where they're putting on a UFC pay-per-view event. So famously, Dana White tells the story of the UFC was on the brink of bankruptcy. They were pretty much like getting ready to, close up shop. They came up with this idea that they needed to do something, and they came up with the Ultimate Fighter because selling the UFC pay-per-views were not enough, and they couldn't get any TV network. This is, quite a long time ago. They couldn't get any TV network that were willing to fund the Ultimate Fighter. So at the end of the day, those two brothers, the Fertitas, they basically said, okay, we're going to put 10 million into this. This is like the last investment we're making into the UFC. If this doesn't work, that's it. We're done. So they put 10 million to produce the show, and then Spike TV basically said, like, we won't fund it, but if you get the show made, we will air it, right? And this was literally the sort of birth of the upward trajectory of the UFC. Right? So this was their booster rocket, right? The Ultimate Fighter was the thing that allowed them to get into orbit. Another one, to bring it back home to Elon, most people don't know this, but Starlink is not created out of Elon's wishes to provide internet for the whole world. Starlink is the booster rocket, in a figurative sense, for him to build the Starship. Because of the immense revenue that they're already generating from the Starlink, they're able to take that money and put it into the development of the Starship, right? Because as you can imagine, there's probably not, maybe at this point, what I was going to say is not so true, in that, if this is like some 20, 30, 40-year mission before you get your money back, investors are probably not going to be dying to throw money into something like, Starship, right? Granted, a lot of people are now very big believers of Elon, so and also they've come a long way, right? This is now 20 years into the story, so perhaps he would be able to get investors to invest into Starship. But the point remains, right? The only reason he created Starlink was that he knew that if we can provide internet to the whole planet, we can generate a lot of revenue, and we can use that revenue to put it into the main thing, which is the Starship, right? And so my point here is that you are probably not going to make it with just the core thing. You need to have a booster rocket of your own. And obviously, this whole channel is about crypto. So we're looking at it from this point of view. So what I want to do next is give you some ideas of different categories of things that you can have that act as a booster rocket. And I'm actually going to pull up my own book to dive into this. You would be surprised, but I think I am the biggest user of my own book, because I kind of wrote this to, put my own playbook into writing. And so I, as I've mentioned on this channel many times, have a terrible memory. So the amount of times that I'm literally coming back to my own book is almost hilarious. I'm reading it like almost on a daily basis. Now, where's the booster rocket? So I'll give you a few categories, and I'll give you a couple of words on all of them. So the first one is the self-liquidating offer, which is, there's another video on this channel about it. The other one is community, education, news, events, and personal brands you could throw in there as well. So if you think about the self-liquidating offer, the idea is you create an offer whose intention is not to make profit, but to generate revenue and eyeballs, basically. So if you think about it in terms of what we just talked about, Starlink, right? You can imagine all of the money that they make from Starlink going back into the development of Starship. There's basically no profit there, right? But it allows them to put the money into Starship. And another example is, something like this, right? I've written this book. This is my booster rocket. I've written this book, and I'm going to advertise this book. So I'm going to spend money on advertising to sell this book. And I'm going to make probably zero money on it, like in terms of profit. But what will happen is I'm able to go out there and spend money to get attention, to get people to find out about me, to get people to read the book, get value out of it. Through that, more opportunities will basically come my way. And it'll essentially be free if I'm able to break even on the book, right? So that's a self-liquidating offer. You create something that you sell. There has to be a transaction. You sell it, and because you sell it, there's going to be revenue coming in. And this also, allows you to spend money on advertising. So you're able to spend $50, get a new customer, spend another 50, get another customer, and kind of repeat that. So you're sort of replenishing your marketing budget. Then we have community. And so viewers of this channel will also know that when I talk about community, I don't mean like followers or users of a product. I mean people who, a group of people who have a shared core desire. They want the same thing in life. And so they're bonding around their desire of that thing. And so you could build a community, and oftentimes you might have to build a community that's sort of built, it'll go like a couple of levels above what you're doing. And what I mean by that is if you take something like a Chainlink, or if you take some privacy protocol or something like that, like you're not going to build a community around a privacy protocol, right? Like, I suppose you could. Maybe like the privacy topic alone could be. It's going to be pretty niche though. But what you can do is like you can go several levels higher where it still makes sense and you're still attracting the right audience. Now that's the key, right? The key is that so let me put it into Chainlink perspective to make it very tangible. So Chainlink, as most people know, is a pricing oracle, right? And so I believe you have to use the Chainlink token through that process of, I suppose, getting the pricing for whatever DeFi app you have or whatever. But if Chainlink wanted to build a community, it wouldn't be around their product, right? So what they could do is go like a level higher or 2 levels higher. So if they go a level higher, it would be something like DeFi, let's say. Like they build a community around, actually that would be almost like 2 levels higher. So 1 level higher would be something like real world asset tokenization, which is more niche than DeFi, right? So they could build a community around real world asset tokenization. So now they're going to basically attract the same target audience, but you can build a community around real world asset tokenization because of the sort of ideas about being early into tokens and basically around either making money through it or through something like freedom and so on and so forth. Or you could go 2 levels higher, which would be even broader, would be something like DeFi, right? So they could build a community around DeFi. Now they have all this attention, they can deploy it to their project, right? Chainlink. So that's the community side. Then we have education. Probably many people watching this, and myself as well, are familiar with a YouTube channel that I don't think is super active anymore. It's called Whiteboard Crypto. This guy did an excellent job of explaining crypto projects, and he got a ton of views, a ton of subscribers, and really fell short on having, he had the booster rocket and he didn't attach it to the actual rocket that was supposed to go to Mars. So he probably would have lost out on millions of dollars, in my opinion. But the point is that if it makes sense, you can use education as a way to get eyeballs, and then you can funnel that attention towards your project. So if we take the guy who was, educating people on crypto, if he was selling something like, like research, like there's like research software, right? Or even like done for you research reports and things of that nature on like specific tokens. If he was selling something like that, he would have made a ton of money, right? Then you have news. News is another category of Booster Rocket. So an example would be, I think it's Permissionless, that's run by Blockworks. And then I think CoinDesk has CoinDesk event. I forget what it's called, but they have a conference, right? Consensus, perhaps? Yeah, there's a conference that is done by CoinDesk. So again, the point remains, right? There are events you can put on, which, this is kind of like a whole business of its own, but certainly can be done as a way to attract eyeballs and then, once again, funnel that attention towards your project. But actually, I kind of started talking about news, didn't I? So I got kind of lost there. So yeah, I kind of mixed the two. So you have events, right? So you have Permissionless, you have Consensus, and so on and so forth. So these are events. And what I started talking about was news. So that would be like Blockworks, right? So Blockworks has a research, like SaaS, they sell software. So they are using their news portal or their news site to generate attention. And once they have that attention, they can get people, funnel them into, selling their software as a service. And the other one really is personal brands. So this is where, usually the founder is building a personal brand around what he or she knows, how they do what they do, and who they are. And they're able to get eyeballs through that, and then they can funnel that towards their project. So that is the idea of of the Booster Rocket. And I think this is something that a lot of crypto founders either don't know about or know about and are willingly fighting it. And nonetheless, this concept I have found to be incredibly helpful. I hope you do as well. Catch you soon. New year almost, so happy new year to people watching right now. Have a good one. Ciao.